A proposed law tightening the reins on kids' social media use awaits a signature from the governor.
As Maddie Kurth reports, the measure comes on the heels of a Surgeon General's warning that unrestricted access to social media could be harming kids' mental health.
Back then it was MySpace, which I don't even know if that still exists.
Parents are faced with new challenges in the digital age. Social media sites growing and expanding faster than before.
My kids are all grown and like I said, TikTok wasn't a thing when my kids were school age. But yeah, it's getting out of control.
A new bill put on Governor John Bel Edwards' desk by the Louisiana legislature is intended to return some control to parents. It would prevent online social networks, gaming sites, and video apps from providing accounts to children under 18.
I monitored myself. I didn't really have any private accounts or anything like that. I was out there, I was careful.
Just 2 weeks before the bill was sent to the governor, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a new advisory about detrimental effects of social media use on the mental health of kids.
Getting exposed to lots of kind of unrealistic ideas about what life is can definitely impact mental health in a negative way.
I see this in my little stepbrother or my sister or whatever who are younger than me, and they're just on their phone on TikTok constantly.
But child psychiatrist Dr. Jennifer Creedon says social media can be useful in moderation. For
a lot of LGBTQ youth, the social media sites can be ways to connect with others. So I think it's really complicated.
An appropriate use, Dr. Creedon adds, looks differently for each child.
A 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old versus an older teenager are accessing or consuming, those should not be the same.
I don't think these, especially some younger kids, don't have that capacity to monitor themselves the way I would.
As the internet expands, social media sites take on new roles. Don Yount hopes tighter restrictions can trickle down to help ease crime rates in New Orleans.
And everything that's going on, especially in New Orleans, with these kids getting younger and younger with the carjackings, they'll film themselves doing it. So the other kids see that, and because you don't see the repercussions of the act that you see on TikTok.
If signed by Governor Edwards, the law wouldn't go into effect until August 1st of 2024. That's because one of the amendment clauses requires the effects of the proposed law to be studied first by the Louisiana State Law Institute.